You do not belong here, old woman. Your trembling hands cannot even tie your kimono properly. Let's see who ends up on the floor in 14 seconds. What did you say? Do you even realize who you are speaking to? I am the state champion, and you are just a miserable housewife who got lost. State champion, huh? Interesting. Tell me, Kyle, have you ever fought a 5th-degree black belt who trained with the Gracie family in Brazil? Silence. Dead silence filled the room, where a moment ago there was loud laughter. The most exciting part is yet to come. Stay tuned to find out how it all ended. Meanwhile, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. The prestigious Iron Phoenix Martial Arts Academy in the heart of Beverly Hills was a sanctuary for the elite. Marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and walls adorned with golden medals and trophies. This place radiated wealth and status. It attracted the children of Hollywood stars, heirs of oil magnates, and young entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley. Membership cost $10,000 per month, and the waiting list stretched for years. Meredith Collins stood before the entrance to this fortress of exclusivity, clutching a worn gym bag. Her faded jeans and plain white t-shirt looked out of place amid the gleaming sports cars parked outside. Bentleys, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, each car worth more than she earned working as a waitress for several years. In a small cafe located in East Los Angeles, Meredith had a reason to be there. A reason that weighed heavily on her heart every night, stealing her sleep. A reason that compelled her to save every penny from her modest income just to afford this one thing. 3 months earlier, her 17-year-old daughter, Emma, had taken her own life. She left behind a note with only 3 words. They broke me. Emma was a gifted girl who had earned a scholarship to a prestigious private school among wealthy children. Instead of opportunities, she encountered nothing but bullying, humiliation, and social rejection. Classmates targeted her for being poor, for not wearing branded clothes, and for having a mother who worked as a waitress. They created social media groups dedicated to mocking her, filmed videos of their torment, and spread malicious rumors. When Emma tried to learn martial arts to defend herself, she joined a local jiu-jitsu class where those same wealthy kids trained and continued the bullying even on the mats. The coach, who received generous donations from their parents, turned a blind eye to the harassment. Emma managed to endure for 6 months, but eventually could not bear it any longer. Meredith discovered her daughter's diary among her belongings, filled with detailed accounts of every humiliation and insult. One name appeared repeatedly: Kyle Sterling, the media magnate's son who was the leader of the bullying both at school and in the sports section. Handsome, popular, with impeccable technique and an impressive collection. He was the golden boy, a star in the local martial arts community. Kyle trained here at Iron Phoenix. Meredith had spent weeks tracking down his schedule and used her last savings on a one-day membership. She had a plan she had been nursing for 3 months, ever since she discovered her daughter's body. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Meredith stepped into the cool marble lobby. Behind the reception desk sat a young blonde woman with perfect makeup and a smile that quickly tightened as she took in Meredith's appearance. "Welcome to Bronix," the girl said, clearly struggling to maintain professional politeness. "How can I help you?" "I signed up for a trial class. Meredith Collins," Meredith replied, pulling a crumpled payment receipt from her wallet. The woman scanned the computer screen, her eyebrows raising in surprise. "Ah, yes, found it. Although I should mention our classes are quite intense. Maybe you might want to consider something more suitable for your age. We do have wonderful yoga groups for elderly ladies." Meredith smiled. She was 43, but constant work on her feet and hard shifts in a cafe had aged her. Gray streaks in her chestnut hair, wrinkles around her eyes, a tired look. She appeared much older than she was. "Jiu-jitsu will be perfect," she said calmly. In the locker room, Meredith changed into an old white kimono, purchased from a second-hand shop, hung softly on her. The fabric felt gentle after countless washes, worn at some spots, but spotless. She carefully tied the white belt, marking her as a beginner, and looked at her reflection. 18 years ago, she was a completely different person. Youthful, driven, and gifted. A promising athlete training in the finest gyms of Brazil, learning techniques from legendary masters. They called her the White Panther because of her lightning-fast moves and deadly accuracy. Then came the car accident. A concussion, broken bones, months spent in the hospital. When she physically recovered, her career lay in ruins. Sponsors vanished, opportunities slipped away. Returning to America, she worked hard to support her newborn daughter, left fatherless. For 18 years, she did not compete professionally, but never stopped training entirely. Every day after her shift at the cafe, she came home to practice for an hour on a homemade dummy in the garage. Not for a career, but for her soul, for keeping fit. Emma sometimes watched, admiring her mother's grace. But Meredith never shared her past with her, ashamed of the shattered dreams. Yet now, all that mattered was justice for Emma. The training hall was vast. Mat tatami mats stretched across hundreds of square meters. Mirror walls reflected the daylight pouring from panoramic windows. Along the walls stood punching bags, training dummies for strike practice, wrestling mannequins, and stands loaded with various equipment filled the room. And everywhere around were them. Los Angeles' privileged youth. Boys and girls dressed in flawless kimonos, embroidered with logos of expensive brands, their belts in different colors, signaling their skill levels. They chatted about their sports cars, weekend plans in Miami, and recent purchases at the radio store. Meredith immediately recognized him. Kyle Sterling stood at the center of the group, telling some story that had everyone bursting into laughter. 21 years old, golden hair, a perfect smile, an athletic build. He wore the latest model kimono worth several $1,000s. The brown belt he had represented a high level of expertise. The very Kyle who had driven her daughter to despair and suicide. "Hey, look who showed up, Grandma," he said loudly, spotting Meredith. "Lost your way. The aqua aerobics class is upstairs." His friends burst into laughter. The girl wearing a pink kimono with a purple belt chimed in. "Seriously, ma'am, this is not a place for people your age. You might get hurt here." "Just look at that kimono," added the boy with the blue belt. "It looks like it was dug out of a trash can. And those sneakers, my God. Where did you find them? At the blush market?" Meredith silently moved to the edge of the tatami mat and began warming up. She remembered every word from Emma's diary. She recalled how her daughter described moments exactly like this one. Public humiliation, ridicule over clothing, social rejection. "Mom, they laughed at my sneakers. They said I wore shoes meant for the poor," wrote Emma. Kyle said people like me had no place among them, that I was dishonoring the whole gym by simply being there. Coach David Harrison, a former professional fighter with tattoos covering his arms and a scar running across his cheek, entered the room and whistled to grab attention. "All right, everyone, let's get started. We have visitors today." He nodded toward Meredith. "Try not to kill the newbie on the very first day." Kyle smirked. "Don't worry, Coach David. We'll be gentle with the grandma." The next hour was a trial for Meredith. She was forced to spar with the most aggressive partners. They intentionally put her in humiliating situations and constantly made remarks about every single move she made. When she attempted basic techniques, more experienced students would accidentally use too much force, causing her to fall face first onto the mat. "Oops, sorry," Kyle said sarcastically after a particularly brutal throw. "Forgot I was dealing with a fragile lady. Maybe you should take up knitting instead." His girlfriend, A girl dressed in a pink jai named Tiffany poured water from her bottle onto Meredith's gym bag. "Oh, how awkward," she sneered, though the bag already looked like trash. "Listen, miss," said a guy with a blue belt, bending down to Meredith during a break. "You don't get it. You are not welcome here. This place is for serious athletes, future champions, not for housewives playing at karate." Meredith. She remained silent, endured, and stored every single word in her memory. Her daughter's voice echoed inside her head. "Mom, they say I am not worthy to breathe the same air as them, that my presence insults this room." By the end of the training session, the taunts had reached their climax. Coach David, clearly enjoying the scene, announced a sparring match. "Meredith," he addressed her with a smirk, "since you are so eager to fight, let's see what you can do." "Kyle, show our guest what real jiu-jitsu looks like." The crowd of students stirred to life. Phones appeared in hands, ready to capture the humiliation. Kyle grinned broadly, cracking his knuckles. "This will be quick," he told those around him. "I bet $20 she quits in 5 seconds." 10 seconds, Tiffany interrupted. She looked pretty determined. "Maybe we should call an ambulance early," joked a guy with a blue belt, and the room burst into laughter. Meredith silently stepped into the center of the tatami. Her heartbeat was steady, her breath calm. She had waited 25 years for this moment. She did not know then what exactly awaited her, but now everything fell into place. "Kyle," she said softly, steel creeping into her voice. "Before we start, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember a girl named Emma Collins?" Kyle froze for a moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Then he shrugged. "I don't know any Emma. Now let's finish this farce." She had studied at St. Michael's Academy, attended the jiu-jitsu section in central Los Angeles. A beautiful girl with chestnut hair and green eyes stood there. Kyle's face twitched as a memory struck him. "Oh, that poor girl. What happened to her? I hope she finally understood that sports are not for someone like her." "She is dead, Kyle." Meredith's words dropped into the hall like sharp icy daggers. She hanged herself 3 months ago. She could not bear the constant humiliation from you and your friends. Silence. Complete silence. Even the music playing from the speakers seemed to fade away. "So what now?" Kyle asked boldly, though his voice held a slight tremor of doubt. "Are you her mother's coming to get revenge?" "I came to teach you a lesson," Meredith replied calmly. "A lesson your wealthy parents forgot to teach you, that every action has consequences." Kyle laughed, but it sounded forced. "Seriously? You think you can do anything to me? I am the state champion, lady. I have a brown belt, and you are just a bitter housewife with a white belt." "Brown belt," Meredith repeated slowly, as she untied her white belt. "Impressive. Tell me, Kyle, how many years have you been training?" 8 years, he answered proudly. "And during that time, I have won more tournaments than you have ever seen on TV." 8 years, Meredith nodded. The white belt fell to the tatami. She bent down to her worn-out bag and pulled out a black cloth bundle. The hall gasped. It was a black belt. Not just any black belt. It had golden stripes symbolizing the Dan ranks. 5 stripes. 5th Dan. 30 years, Meredith said quietly as she tied the belt around her waist. I have been training for nearly 30 years. I started when I was 14 in Brazil. I studied under Carlos Gracie. I was once a world champion among women until an injury stopped me." Kyle turned pale. The other students stepped back. Their shocked mouths were agape. "They called me the White Panther," Meredith continued while tying her belt. "Maybe you have heard that name in documentaries about jiu-jitsu. Meredith White Panther Collins." Coach David dropped his water bottle. He recognized the name. Every serious fighter knew it well. She was a female jiu-jitsu legend who vanished from the sport at the height of her career. That cannot be, Kyle whispered. The White Panther is either dead or extremely old. I am 43, Meredith said as she took a fighting stance. Suddenly her movements shifted, the tired steps of a housewife, the slouched shoulders, and uncertainty disappeared. Instead, the grace of a predator appeared. Absolute confidence in every gesture. Now I will show you the difference between true mastery and the arrogance of a boy who thinks his daddy's money makes him unbeatable. Kyle tried to strike first, but his moves seemed slow and clumsy compared to what followed. Meredith intercepted his attack, executed a classic judo throw, and the next moment, Kyle lay on his back, while Meredith's hand clutched his throat in a choking hold. 14 seconds, she said calmly, glancing at the wall clock. That is how long it took me to bring down a state champion. Kyle frantically slapped the mat with sweaty hands, surrendering. His face was pale with defeat, his face flushed from lack of oxygen. Meredith held her grip for a few more seconds, looking straight into his eyes. "This is for my daughter," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. When she finally let go, Kyle began coughing, gasping for air. The room fell silent. Complete quiet filled the space. Meredith stood up, brushed off her kimono, and scanned the other students. There was a fire in her eyes they had never witnessed before. "Who else wants to learn respect?" she asked. No one dared to respond. Tiffany, who had been mocking the grandmother just moments ago, now pressed herself against the wall, desperate to avoid attention. The young man with the blue belt stared down at the floor, unable to raise his eyes. "Do you even understand real jujitsu?" Meredith continued, addressing everyone in the room. "This is not about cheap kimonos or daddy's money. It is about discipline, respect, humility, defending the weak, not humiliating them." She then moved closer to Tiffany, who shrank back in fear. "Do you remember pouring water on my bag?" Meredith asked gently. "Want to try that again?" Tiffany shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "My daughter wrote in her diary about people like you," Meredith went on. "About girls who think their wealth gives them the right to put others down." She wrote about how Tiffany laughed at her clothes, how she humiliated her publicly, right in front of the entire class. "I didn't know," Tiffany whispered quietly. "I didn't know that poor people have feelings, that your words can hurt, or that one day you will face consequences for everything. You will have to answer for this." Meredith turned toward the coach David, who stood frozen, unable to find words. "And you," she spoke, ice clear in her voice. "Did you witness how they tormented my daughter?" He had seen everything but remained silent because their parents paid him generously. "Listen," David began hesitantly. "I could not." "You could," Meredith interrupted sharply. "You could have stood up and defended the child, demonstrated to those spoiled boys what true values are. Yet instead, you turned your gym into a place for bullying." She stepped forward, and David instinctively took a step back. "Do you know what is the most tragic?" Meredith continued. "Emma was gifted, incredibly gifted. Given a chance, she might have become a great athlete. However, you crushed her spirit, trampled on her dreams." Her voice wavered on the last words, revealing raw pain for the first time all day. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she quickly regained composure. Meanwhile, Kyle rose to his feet, rubbing his throat, his face burning with shame and anger. "Do you think this will change anything?" he said harshly. "Do you believe your display will make us feel guilty? We never did anything criminal. If your daughter was so fragile that she couldn't handle ordinary teasing, that is her problem." Meredith slowly turned to him. Something in her gaze made everyone in the room shudder. "Ordinary teasing," she repeated softly. "You called it constant bullying, creating groups on social networks to humiliate her, spreading rumors, physical attacks disguised as ordinary teasing." "She was a weakling," Kyle insisted stubbornly. "In our world, only the strong survive." Strong? Meredith laughed, but that laughter was more terrifying than any scream. You think you're strong? Then let's see. She got back into her fighting stance again. Let's have a real sparring match. No rules, no limits. Let's see how strong you are when your opponent can fight back. Kyle hesitated. On one hand, he was torn by anger and the desire to restore his reputation. On the other hand, he had just learned a harsh lesson from this woman and knew he could suffer even more serious injuries. "What are you afraid of?" Meredith asked mockingly. "Where's your confidence? Or are you only brave when mocking defenseless kids?" Pride took over. Kyle nodded. "Fine, but when I break a few of your ribs, do not say I did not warn you." The real fight began, and it was nothing like the audience expected. Meredith moved like a dancer, smooth and graceful, but every move was deadly precise. She toyed with Kyle like a cat with a mouse, letting him attack and then instantly countering, making him fall, spin, and grasp at air. Kyle was a good fighter for his level, but the difference in skill was massive. Meredith seemed to read his thoughts, anticipating every move. She turned his own strength against him, transforming every one of his strikes into a trap. After 5 minutes, Kyle was breathing heavily and drenched in sweat. His kimono had been torn in multiple spots. Bruises appeared across his face. Meredith looked as if she had only just begun warming up. "Tired?" she asked, without even showing signs of exhaustion. "Want to give up?" "Never," Kyle growled as he tried to launch a final desperate attack. Meredith intercepted his move, executed an intricate flip, and suddenly found herself behind him, wrapping her arms around his neck in a choking grip. This time she had no intention of letting go quickly. "This is called the constrictor hold," she calmly said, gradually tightening the pressure. "In just 30 seconds, you will lose consciousness. Another minute after that, and you risk permanent brain damage." Kyle struggled with all his might to break free, but Meredith's arms felt like iron clamps. "Give up," she whispered in his ear, "just like my daughter did. Feel what it's like to be defenseless." Kyle patted his sweaty hand in surrender, yet Meredith didn't release him. "Please," he rasped, "let me go." "Emma was pleading too," Meredith said softly. "She begged you to leave her alone, to give her a chance. But you ignored her." Kyle's face started to turn blue as his eyes rolled back. "Meredith!" shouted Coach David. "Stop! You'll kill him!" She stared at him coldly. So what? Wouldn't the world be better off with one less sadist? Yet, after a few moments, she finally released Kyle, who collapsed onto the tatami. Gasping for air, coughing and sobbing, Kyle barely managed to whisper, "Why? Why did you not kill me?" Meredith crouched beside him and spoke softly. "Because I am not like you. I do not find pleasure in others' suffering, but I wanted you to feel even a fraction of the pain my daughter endures every single day." Rising, she faced everyone present and said firmly, "Listen closely," her voice carrying undeniable authority that demanded attention. Martial arts are not a means to dominate the weak. They embody a journey of self-discipline, constant growth, and protecting those who cannot defend themselves. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. A beautiful girl with chestnut hair and green eyes smiled from the picture. "This is my daughter Emma," Meredith explained, showing the photo. She was 17, full of hopes, plans, and an entire life ahead of her. Yet you stripped all of that away through your cruelty. Tiffany began to cry while a few other students turned away, unable to look. She wanted to become a coach, Meredith continued, to open a martial arts school for children from poor families. She wished to give them what you have taken from her. Putting the photo away, Meredith looked at Kyle, who still sat on the floor clutching his throat. "You asked if it changes anything," she said. Yes, it does. Because now you know every action has consequences, and the pain you caused cannot be ignored. The harm you caused to others can come back to you many times over. She started gathering her belongings. Meredith, called her coach David. What? What will happen now? Meredith turned to him. What do you think should happen? You expect me to report to the police how I beat up a group of young athletes? She smiled faintly. No, it was justice, not revenge, a lesson, not punishment. She headed towards the exit but paused in the doorway. However, she said without turning around, if I find out that any of you continue to bully people, if I hear even one case of bullying in this gym, I will return, and next time, I will not be so merciful. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving the room in complete silence. Kyle slowly stood up. Everyone looked at him, some with sympathy, others with judgment. His reputation as an unbeatable champion was shattered forever. She really was the White Panther, Tiffany whispered. Coach David nodded. I checked online while you were fighting. Meredith Collins was world champion in 1997 and 1998. She vanished from the sport after a car accident in 1999. 25 years, muttered the young man with a blue belt. 25 years she stayed off the tatami and still beat our best fighter. Kyle said nothing. He slowly walked to the locker room. Every step was difficult, not because of physical pain, but because of the weight of what he had done. In the locker room, he took out his phone and searched online for articles about Emma Collins' suicide. He read about a girl who earned a scholarship to a prestigious school, but could not withstand the social pressure. Reading the comments from classmates who remembered her as kind, talented, yet extremely fragile. For the first time in many years, Kyle Sterling shed tears. Outside, Meredith sat in her old Honda, resting her head on the steering wheel for a while. The adrenaline was slowly fading, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. She had done what she intended, taught a lesson to those who had driven her daughter to death. But Emma would not come back because of this. The pain in her heart had not diminished. Meredith reached into the glove compartment and pulled out another photo, one of her and Emma at their high school graduation. Both were smiling, hugging, dreaming about the future. I avenged you, baby, she whispered quietly. I hope now you can finally rest in peace. She started the car and drove home to her small apartment in East Los Angeles. Tomorrow she had to go to work at the cafe, serve coffee and sandwiches, smile at customers, pretend life went on. Yet something had changed. For 25 years, she had hidden her strength, felt ashamed of her past, and let the world trample her. Today, for the first time in a quarter of a century, she felt like herself. A White Panther, a legend in martial arts. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Meanwhile, at the Iron Phoenix dojo, training never resumed. The students left for home, each lost in thought about what had happened. Some felt guilty, while others gained a new understanding of the situation. True strength is something else entirely. Kyle Sterling never again tormented those who were vulnerable. The lesson Meredith taught him stayed with him for a lifetime. He even established a charity named after Emma Collins to support children facing bullying. But that is a different story altogether. The tale of the White Panther, who returned to honor her daughter's memory, became legendary within Los Angeles' martial arts circles. It was said she appeared wherever the strong oppressed the weak, always nearby, ready to teach a lesson to those who had forgotten honor and justice. That truth was known only to Meredith Collins herself. A month later, Meredith opened a small martial arts school in her neighborhood. She offered free classes to children from disadvantaged families, paying close attention to those experiencing bullying at school. On the wall hung a photograph of a smiling girl with chestnut hair. Beneath it was a plaque that read, Emma Collins Martial Arts School. Here, Every child finds protection and support. Each day, donning her white kimono to work with the kids, Meredith recalled the words her first instructor told her in Brazil. True strength is not about defeating the powerful. True strength lies in defending the weak. Emma would be proud, yet the story did not end there. Half a year later, an unexpected visitor arrived at Meredith's school. Kyle Sterling stood in the doorway clutching a box. He had lost a great deal of weight. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he had been sleepless for a long time. "Miss Collins," he said softly, "may I speak with you?" Meredith nodded and motioned for the children to continue their practice on their own. "What do you want, Kyle?" He placed a box on the floor and pulled out a stack of papers, photographs, and notes. "This is everything I could find about your daughter. Photos from the school archive, her grades, and assignments she wrote. I wanted you to have this." Meredith took one of the photos. Emma was at a school event, a little shy but smiling. "Why?" she asked. "Because I want her to be remembered not only as a victim. She was an amazing girl, smart and kind. I read her essay. She dreamed of making the world a better place." His voice trembled. "I have not slept properly since that day. Every night I see her face. I know I could have stopped it, could have protected her instead of joining in the bullying." Meredith watched him silently. "I started a foundation in her name," Kyle continued. "It has already helped 50 children who faced bullying. But it is not enough. It will never be enough." "What do you want from me?" Meredith asked. "Forgiveness," he whispered. "I know I do not deserve it. I know nothing will bring your daughter back. But I have changed. I understand what I did." Meredith was silent for a long time, looking at the photos of her daughter. "Emma was a very kind child," she said at last. "She always believed people could become better, even after everything that happened. She wrote in her diary that she hoped one day you would understand your mistakes." Kyle broke down in tears. "She was better than all of us," he sobbed. "Yes," Meredith agreed. "So much better." She reached out her hand to him. "Emma would forgive you, which means I forgive you too. But forgiveness is not forgetting. You have to carry that weight for your entire life and use it to become a better person." Kyle grasped her hand tightly, tears streaming without pause. "Thank you," he whispered. "I will be worthy of this forgiveness. I promise." After he left, Meredith sat alone in the hall, sifting through photographs of her daughter. In one of them, Emma was wearing a kimono with a white belt, proudly showing her first medal. "See, little one," Meredith whispered. "You were right. People can change, even the worst of them." Outside, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the tatami mats. The hall was silent and peaceful. Meredith closed her eyes, and for the first time in many months, she felt a sensation resembling calm. Emma could finally rest in peace, and her mother could move forward by helping other children avoid her daughter's fate. The story had ended, but the legacy endured. In every child who gained confidence within Emma Collins's school walls, in every moment when the strong protected the weak instead of belittling them, in every person who remembered the lesson of the White Panther, that true strength comes not from the ability to cause pain, but from the power to prevent it. And somewhere in a parallel world, 17-year-old Emma Collins, she smiled, proud of her mother, and amazed by how much the world had changed since her passing. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from the power of fists, but from the strength of the heart. The most valuable lessons are taught not through words, but by example. The White Panther hunted again, but now her prey was not opponents on the mat. It was injustice, cruelty, and indifference. She never stopped until she found her purpose. Every mother has a duty to her child, and that duty does not end even with death. Yet fate had another blow waiting for Meredith. 1 year after opening the school, Detective Michael Rodriguez arrived. A tall man with tired eyes and graying temples, he seemed to carry the weight of the city's unsolved cases on his shoulders. "Miss Collins," he said, showing his badge. "I need to speak with you about your daughter." Meredith's heart skipped a beat. What? What about Emma? She had been dead for 1.5 years. Yes, I know. But recently we arrested a man for a different crime, and he revealed some details related to your daughter's death. The detective pulled out a folder. "You might want to sit down." Meredith sank into a chair, feeling as if the ground had slipped beneath her feet. The man we arrested is Bradley Sterling, Kyle Sterling's father. He is charged with corruption and money laundering. Trying to get a lighter sentence, he began cooperating with the investigation. The detective opened the folder. According to his testimony, the circumstances of your daughter's death, the death of the daughter, was not exactly a suicide. The world around Meredith started spinning. What do you mean? Kyle Sterling Sr. found out that Emma was planning to sue the school and his son for ongoing bullying. She had evidence, pictures, witnesses. The case could cost the family millions of dollars in damages and destroy their reputation. The detective's voice softened. According to him, he had hired a private investigator to gather dirt on your daughter. This investigator accessed her social media, private messages, found information about her depression, and thoughts about ending her life. Meredith felt nausea rising. Then he created fake accounts and began sending Emma anonymous messages, convincing her she was unwanted, that the world would be better without her. He sent links on methods to commit suicide and forums where people talked about death. "No," Meredith whispered. "No, this cannot be true." Sterling said he never intended her death, only wanted to scare her, to silence her. But the plan worked too well. The detective handed her printouts of the messages. This was a conversation between the private investigator and your daughter during the week before her death. "Read them." Meredith took the papers with trembling hands. What she read broke her heart completely. "Emma, do you really think anyone will miss you? Your mother works as a waitress. Do you think she would not be happier without the burden of a failed daughter? Face the truth. You will never be good enough for this world. There is a simple way to end the pain forever." Every message was a calculated blow aimed at the psyche of a vulnerable teenager. Each word was carefully chosen to push Emma toward the edge, toward the abyss. "They killed my daughter," whispered Meredith. Her voice carried such anguish that the detective looked away. They had destroyed her just as surely as if they had thrown her off a roof. "Mrs. Collins, I understand how difficult this is." "No," Meredith interrupted, rising abruptly and clutching the printouts. "You do not understand. For 1.5 years, I believed my daughter was weak, unable to cope with hardships. I blamed myself for failing to protect her, but it turns out she was deliberately driven to suicide." Tears of fury streamed down her cheeks. "What will happen to them? What about Sterling and his son?" "Sterling Sr. will receive a reduced sentence for cooperating. The private detective has already disappeared and we are searching for him." "And Kyle? Technically, he was not involved in this part of the plan. So nobody will be punished for my daughter's death." The detective sighed. Proving someone pushed another to suicide is very difficult, especially after so much time has passed. Meredith remained silent for a long time, clenching and unclenching her fists. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she finally said. "Now I know what I must do." Mrs. Collins, the detective, placed a hand on her shoulder. "I understand how you feel, but please, don't do anything reckless. The law is the law." Meredith turned to him, and her eyes burned fiercely. The law allowed a wealthy man to order this. Psychological murder. A 17-year-old girl destroyed and left unharmed. What kind of justice do you speak of?" The detective walked away, leaving Meredith alone with her fury and pain. She sat in the empty school auditorium, clutching a picture of Emma, feeling something dark and merciless growing inside her. That evening, Kyle came to see her. He often visited the school, helped with the children, trying to make amends. But tonight, Meredith looked at him with different eyes. "You knew," she said without any hesitation. Kyle turned pale. "What are you talking about? That your father hired the detective? That they pushed my daughter to take her own life?" "I did not know," he whispered. "I swear I only found out today, when my father called from prison." "And what are you going to do about it?" Kyle lowered his head. "I do not know. I tried to contact the prosecutor, offered to testify against my father, but they said my testimony would not help. I have no direct evidence. So your father will remain unpunished. Meredith, I understand how you feel." "No, you do not understand," she exploded. "You cannot understand, because your family is the one killing other people's children for money and status." Kyle recoiled as if slapped. "I am not like him," he quietly said. "You know I have changed." "Changed?" Meredith laughed bitterly. "You think a few months of charity make up for a contract killing? This was not a contract killing. This was murder," she shouted. "Meredith." So the glass in the windows shook. "They also destroyed my daughter, as if someone had shot her in the head. The only difference is that psychological bullets leave no marks." Kyle started crying. "What do you want from me? What can I do?" Meredith responded with a cold tone. "I want justice. I want your father to pay for what he did." "But how?" "The law is on his side." Meredith looked at him with a long stare. "Then it is time to forget the law." The next day, Meredith went to the prison where Bradley Sterling was held. The wealthy businessman used to command and buy everything and everyone, now sat in an orange jumpsuit behind bulletproof glass. "Mrs. Collins," he said, picking up the receiver. A crooked smile was on his face. "Finally, we meet in person." "You ordered the murder of my daughter," Meredith said bluntly. "Murder?" Sterling laughed. "I did not kill anyone. Your daughter chose her own path after your detective pushed her toward that choice. It is impossible to prove, and my lawyer has already made a deal with the prosecutor. I will be out in 2 years, maximum." Sterling leaned closer to the glass. "You know what is funniest? Your little girl was so pathetically weak. A few anonymous messages and she was ready to hang herself. If it had not been for my detective, someone else would have driven her to that sooner or later." Meredith sat motionless, but inside a storm of rage raged. "You poor people are all the same," Sterling continued. "You think the world owes you something. You should. But when confronted with reality, you immediately break down." "You are right about one thing," Meredith said quietly. "Reality can be cruel." She stood up. "However, you forgot something, Bradley. Sometimes victims fight back." Sterling smirked. "What are you going to do? Sue me? I have the best lawyers in the country." "We will see," Meredith replied and hung up. The following weeks she dedicated to preparing herself, reached out to journalists who specialized in investigating corruption among the wealthy, gave them all the documents the detective provided, as well as her own records about Emma's bullying. Sterling was wealthy and influential, but Meredith had something he never possessed: the truth and the determination to seek justice no matter what. The first article appeared in a major newspaper. It was titled, "The Media Mogul Who Ordered the Psychological Murder of a Teenager." The story instantly went viral. Social media exploded with discussions. Hashtags supporting Emma started trending. Meredith gave interviews to several TV channels, calmly and with dignity, describing what happened to her daughter. Every word hit the mark perfectly. "My daughter was killed just as surely as if someone shot her in the head," she said live on air. The only difference is psychological bullets leave no trace. The public was outraged. A wealthy businessman who orchestrated driving a 17-year-old girl to suicide in order to protect his son's reputation became a symbol of everything wrong with the justice system. Protests erupted outside the prison, petitions demanding a case review circulated, and Sterling's company faced a boycott. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Then the unthinkable happened. About 1 month after Bradley Sterling's media campaign began, overwhelmed by the public shame and horror of realizing what he had done, he truly took his own life in his cell. He left a note confessing to driving the minor Emma Collins to suicide and begged for forgiveness from her mother. "I did not want her death," he wrote. "I only wanted to scare her, to make her stop. But I understand now that I became a murderer. I cannot live with this." Kyle arrived at Meredith's place on the day the news of her father's suicide broke everywhere. "This is because of you," he said. "Not an accusation, just stating a fact." Meredith sat in her living room holding a photo of Emma in her lap. "I only told the truth to the journalists. People drew their own conclusions. Her father would never have ended his life if it weren't for the public pressure you all created. Maybe he just could not bear the weight of what he had done." Kyle sat beside her. "What now?" he asked. "You got revenge. Do you feel better?" Meredith was silent for a long time. "No," she finally said. "Revenge does not bring back the dead. It does not fill the emptiness in the heart. But now, I know justice has been served." "And what about me?" Kyle asked. "I'm also responsible for Emma's death." Meredith looked at him. "You have changed. You are trying to make amends. Your father, to his last breath, believed he was right. Enough. It is not my place to decide. Emma was an incredibly forgiving person. Perhaps she would have forgiven you too." Kyle started crying. "I miss her," he whispered. "I know I have no right, but I often think about who she was. Kind and intelligent. I destroyed something beautiful." "Yes, destroyed," Meredith agreed. "But now you have the opportunity to build something wonderful in return." She gestured towards the children training in the gym. "Each one of these kids could become the next Emma. Your task is to make sure that does not happen." A year passed. Emma Collins' school grew. Now more than 100 children were training there. Kyle became one of the instructors, dedicating his life to fighting bullying. One day, Meredith received a visit from a girl around 14 years old. She had red hair, glasses, and bruises on her arms. "Are you the White Panther?" she asked softly. "Where did you hear that name?" "On the internet. They say you protect kids who are being bullied." Meredith looked at the bruises on the girl's arms. "What is your name?" "Sophie." "Sophie Johnson? Tell me what is going on, Sophie." The girl shared a story that Meredith had heard hundreds of times. Wealthy students at school, constant harassment, teachers turning a blind eye, and desperate parents. "I have thought about dark things," Sophie whispered. "Sometimes it feels like the only way out." Meredith hugged her tightly. "No," she said firmly. "That is not a way out. That is exactly what your tormentors want, for you to disappear. But we will not let them have that satisfaction. What will you do?" "I will teach you to defend yourself if—" Meredith smiled with a cold expression. "I will visit your school and speak with your tormentors," she said. For the first time in many months, Sophie smiled. "I promise you truly." That evening, Meredith sat alone in the room, as usual talking to a photograph of her daughter. "See, little one, your death was not in vain. Every child we save is a piece of you that continues to live on." She gently touched the picture with her fingers. "I know you would want me to forgive and forget, but I cannot. Some things are unforgivable, yet I can make sure no other child suffers as you did." Outside, the lights of Los Angeles shone brightly, a vast city full of injustice and pain. But in one small room in the Eastern District, a different flame burned, a flame of hope, protection, and a mother's love stronger than death. As that flame continued to burn, while the White Panther pursued justice, children could sleep peacefully, knowing someone was shielding them. Somewhere in a parallel world, 17-year-old Emma Collins looked at her mother with pride for what her pain had become, a force defending others. Because true love does not end with death. It transforms, becoming something greater, something indestructible. In this was Emma's final victory over those who tried to break her.